Welcome to Red Flags and Real Love, hosted by Virginia McConnell, dating and relationship pattern coach, specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery and someone who has lived everything she teaches. This show is about recognizing the patterns that keep us stuck, leaving what's hurting us, and rebuilding into something real. Here's your host, Virginia McConnell.
Welcome to Red Flags and Real Love. I'm Virginia McConnell, and I have a wonderful guest with me today. My guest today is Violet Lange, and Violet is a dating, relationship, and intimacy coach who helps women attract healthy, lasting love. So welcome, Violet. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do in the world. I think too many of us repeat old patterns, even if we don't want to, and thank you for helping people change those.
Yes, no, and thank you for being in this space as well. And I think it would be a good start just to kind of let everyone know what you do and a little bit about your background. And then we can dig into some juicy little questions.
Of course. So I'll start with my background. I felt like there were a lot of areas of life that I had figured out except for romantic relationship. And I kept either dating people who are really safe but boring and it would fizzle out, or there would be no intimacy physically and then emotionally, or I would date people who were really unhealthy and I would feel like it was whiplash, like, oh, how did I get myself in this situation again? And so through my own journey and then becoming a coach and getting certified as a coach, as well as other tools like somatic and embodiment practices, and I won't go into all of those now. I just have become really passionate about helping people create lasting love and break the cycles that they may be unknowingly or not desiring to recreate, but they just maybe didn't have healthy role modeling growing up for healthy love.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. A lot of people don't realize that they might have some of those, patterns or traits that might be contributing negatively to a relationship.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I know for myself, I just kept thinking, well, this person seems different. And then a few weeks or a few months go by and they're not different, right? And it took me a long time and a lot of, I guess, working with my own shame to realize, wow, I'm doing things that are not helping. I'm not responsible for the abuse that I'm experiencing. And I don't need to take ownership of that, but I need to recognize there are certain ways that I'm people pleasing, not setting boundaries, fantasizing, not really connecting to my true needs and desires, hoping and wishing that it's all just going to be okay. And then it's not. And so that's a really painful wake up, but I think that's important for us to realize that we actually do have more power in our love life than we think we do. It doesn't just have to be luck or fate or like winning the lottery.
Right. And I think that education is the biggest way to do that. Like if keep doing what you're doing. I love what you're doing and your education pieces as well. And I do want to kind of go into how do you think or when someone might know that they're actually like ready to date again versus just not wanting to be alone, like being lonely. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an important question. I'm glad that you brought this up. I had found for myself that it was really hard for me to take long breaks from dating because, like many of us, I just really wanted love and wanted that sense of closeness. And that was coming from a really earnest place. But I wasn't always giving myself the time and the tools to actually date differently. And the biggest thing for me was just slowing down, not putting the other person on a pedestal, not rushing in, not assuming they're the one. I kind of joke to my clients all the time. I'm like, they're not the one until you're literally married. And even then you can always leave if you need to. Like we're never fated to a certain situation. To me, the signs that someone is ready to date again after going through heartbreak or betrayal or narcissistic abuse is that they're able to connect to a sense of uncertainty, which I know is really hard, but they're able to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to date and I'm going to take it slowly and I'm going to see what emerges. And I don't need the other person to make my life better or to fulfill me in a certain way. There's a level of, I don't know, I guess maturity or self-awareness. Is not really maturity because we can be very mature and still be working with this. But I think it's just recognizing that I'm going to date with a perspective of, I'm doing this for myself. I'm doing this as a spiritual path. I'm doing this to learn about myself. I'm doing this to practice some new skills with boundary setting. And I'm going to do it with eyes wide open. And that might mean that it's a very different experience of dating than I've had before, but ultimately going to lead me to a much healthier outcome. I mean, in terms of time, time off, I've heard this kind of like half-life theory, where it takes us half as long as we were in a relationship to grieve and get over it before we're actually ready for a next relationship. I don't think that's exactly true. You know, if you were in a 20-year marriage, it's not going to take you 10 years to get over your partner, especially if you were grieving and doing some of that inner work while you were getting out of that relationship. But I would say it does take, you know, at a minimum, like 3 months, ideally 6 months, to really reset our patterns.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. And I think that it's really important that what you said is, you know, it's when you start to notice it is when you can start making the change and like really being more cognizant of what you're doing and more purposeful with dating. And I think when you're not doing that, you're very whimsical and you get caught up in the chemistry and you're more susceptible to, you know, red flags and ignoring them and letting people walk over your boundary. You know, you allow a little bit more things to happen when you're in that mindset. So I think that was very well said. I completely agree. And what do you think the hardest part about dating after like a really bad experience with a narcissistic abusive relationship or toxic relationship, that kind of experience, what kind of catches people off guard that they're not really expecting after they start dating again?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. What I find is the hardest thing to do is actually have, like you talk about all the time, you know, healthy boundaries. So we don't want to have a huge wall up, because then if we have a wall up, the only person who can break down that wall is someone who is love bombing us, someone who is like full throttle ahead. And then we all know that that's going to be a big problem down the road, but we don't notice at the time because we're like, oh, there's someone who finally loves me. But if our boundaries are a little more, not porous, but like healthy, right? Which means we can take the good stuff in and we can expel the bad stuff, kind of like a cell wall. Then we're going to attract someone who's healthier. So I think the hardest thing is to recognize we have to keep the hope, but not the fantasy. And we have to stay open, but not too, like you said, whimsical. And so the word sounds really cheesy and basic, but it's about balance. Like, how do we be balanced as we date? And how do we not get stuck in the fear and anxiety? I know for myself and a lot of my clients, they start dating, and because it feels different than their past experiences, because there's not love bombing or like seeing each other 4 days a week in the first few weeks of meeting, it can feel boring, or people start feeling insecure. I don't think they really like me. It's like, no, actually the fact that you're seeing them once every week is super healthy. It doesn't mean they're not attracted. So we also have to deal with our own insecurities that come up when we're used to being love bombed.
Yeah. And I feel like for me personally, I had a lot of insecurities come up when I was fresh into dating that I did not expect. So I completely relate to that.
Yeah, that's a great share. Like, I think we get told this myth that love should just be easy and it should just happen. And our Prince Charming just shows up on our doorstep, but that just feeds into these kind of narcissistic principles or ideals. And the truth of it is exactly what you're saying. Like, when we go back into dating, it will feel different. It will bring up our insecurities. And we have to learn to soothe our nervous system and regulate ourselves and remind ourselves of our worth instead of sourcing that from someone else. But it leads to a healthier relationship down the road.
Yeah. And nervous system regulation is something I don't think a lot of people talk enough about, because, gosh, that was a missing piece for myself for a long time. And I just couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I feel like I've done all these tools, I've learned all this stuff, and I'm still feeling like my body, is like in fight or flight still. I don't understand. And once I finally got like that part of it, I feel like I really started true healing from the inside.
Yeah, that's a great epiphany. I feel like I went through something similar where I was like, but I go on runs and I work out and I go to yoga class sometimes. And it's like, that stuff was great. I mean, that was definitely helping me, but it did take that inner work of somatic experiencing or naming and noticing like, oh, I'm feeling tight in my belly. And in the past, I'd be like, oh, let's just blow past that physical sensation because this person is texting me a lot and it feels really good. So it's like that deeper awareness and deeper work, which for me was somatic experiencing, but it's for me also was about being with my emotions. Like if I felt angry before or frustrated in dating, I would never share that with someone because I'd be like, oh, that's not nice. I don't want to offend them. And I had to learn to kind of set these micro boundaries of like, oh, I'm feeling frustrated and disappointed that you were 15 minutes late for a date. I know it's not a big deal, but that really matters to me. Like I want to feel like both of our time is really respected. And I was terrified to set those little boundaries, but I found that as I did, then I could tell, does the person shame me? Do they blow up at me? Do they minimize what I'm saying? And yeah, if I hadn't gotten in touch with my feelings and the physical sensations in my body, I think it would have been much harder to date. The last thing I'll say about that is I didn't really realize until my early 30s that I felt kind of muddy and dissociated inside. I only knew if I felt good or bad. I couldn't describe like, oh, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm scared, I'm, angry. Like I just didn't have the template inside of me because I grew up in a household with a lot of narcissistic abuse. And I was used to, oh, I only know how I feel based on how the other person is feeling.
Oh, wow. That actually hits pretty right on for me as well. I feel like I just talked about this the other day. Yeah, you just have no idea that you're in this until you're really, in it, and you start opening your eyes. Yeah, that's very well said. Very well said. And I want to go back to the keep the hope, but not the fantasy. That I think is really hard for a lot of us coming out of these types of relationships because we're not sure what to really look for other than having that fantasy. So do you have any helpful tips on eliminating more of that fantasy?
Yeah. And I totally hear you because most of my life, I was like, I just want to have a good partnership. And I remember in my, sometime in my late teens, someone asking, well, what's your biggest fear in life? And I was like, oh, it's that I'm never going to get married. And they're like, what? How is that a fear? And I'm like, because I don't feel lovable. I don't feel like anyone would ever choose me. And so my biggest fear is that that's true, right? And that I'm never going to have a love relationship. Well, that of course, took me into relationships where I was constantly proving that I was lovable and where I was hanging on to breadcrumbs. And I won't get into all the details of that. But for me, it's about putting my hands on my heart and saying, I'm 100% committed to myself. I will never abandon myself. So that means even if I'm afraid this person is going to abandon me when I set a boundary, I know that I come first, again, which is very counterintuitive to how I grew up and what I learned about love. And I think the hope piece is that I'm going to believe that there is not just one person out there, but that there could be lots of different people that I could build a healthy relationship with. I think the fantasy comes in when we're like, there's just one and I'm looking for the one, because then we get in our heads like, well, this person isn't treating me that well, but maybe they're the one. And I'll just suffer through the painful part because I'm going to get what I want after all. And again, that's kind of a childhood coping strategy of, oh, my parent is not attuning to me or worse, being abusive or neglectful, but maybe it'll get better. And then we learn to just stay in situations that aren't very good for us out of the hopes that it will someday get better. So the fantasy is, again, this myth that our Prince Charming is just going to show up and we don't have to do any inner work. But our fairy tale and our happily ever after actually begins with us. It begins with our own inner journey, which I know is disappointing, but is also very empowering. And for me, it was also about recognizing, let's see, right? Like, okay, this is off to a good start. Let's see. And then just catching this kind of, for me, very innocent and lovable, but very childlike part of me that was around like 6 to 8 years old. It's like, oh, well, maybe this is it. And I just wanted to kind of unconsciously fall into entrainment. You talked about nervous system. It's like, I'm so easily entraining to someone else's nervous system that I'm just falling into their reality and what they want and how they're describing the situation. And then, of course, the shoe drops and I'm just like, what? I didn't think this was what it was. And so then I'm kind of climbing my way back to that initial falling in love stage and just holding on to that for dear life. And so the hope that there are many people that could meet our needs. And it's about really finding someone who wants to grow with us and who's willing to be self-aware and willing to do the work. And recognizing that the fantasy is probably coming from a younger, unhealed part of us. And then for me, it was actually giving that part of me ways to still be in that energy of fantasy. Like, I used to wear like these knee-high socks with unicorns on them, is like finding the magical part of me and letting her really play and get her needs met and not having her have to attach to the person I was dating.
Oh, I love that so much. I've never heard that, like going back to the inner child, and that makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense. I love it. What does a healthy, early on in the relationship actually feel like when you're so used to chaos? And how do you keep yourself from reading as the calm, as not boring?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I think everyone is going to feel different and maybe wants to feel different in relationships. So I'm going to give some generalizations, but please, anyone listening, tailor this for yourself. I think most of us are looking for something where we feel excited, but also emotionally safe, where we feel a level of attraction, but also respect. And that respect is mutual, right? We respect them and they respect us. And again, it sounds kind of cheesy, but equality, we're not on a pedestal, they're not on a pedestal. And part of me and my journey was recognizing that sometimes I put people on this pedestal because even though I, in quotations, am the underdog, if I put them up on the pedestal, that makes me the good one. That makes me the innocent one. I was attached to being seen in a certain way. And so in early stages of dating, I think it's important to recognize, how do I feel around this person? And how far away from my baseline is that, right? If I normally feel my emotional home is somewhere between contentedness and mild anxiety or something. If I'm with someone and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, I'm flying high for days in a row and I'm rushing to my phone to see every time I hear a notification if it's them. And okay, that's a little too high for my baseline. There's going to be a crash. Mm-hmm. And for me, I had to do intense things like turn my phone off or put it in the other room, or sometimes I would delete someone's number if I was oh, I just want to text them so badly. I'd be they're going to text me back. And if they don't, then that's evidence in and of itself. So prioritizing my own nervous system regulation, feeling emotionally safe, and then noticing when it was getting boring. And I know a lot of women don't want to do this, but noticing when it felt boring, what is attractive about this person? Instead of, oh, I'm not attracted to them anymore, they're too nice, or, it's just not interesting, to think, well, I do like, the way they dress, or I do like that they're pretty consistent with the way they text me, or, I do like that they're a good doggy daddy or whatever their thing is. I also found that I was looking for my love life to be entertainment because I was working really hard in my other in my job and in my career, and kind of the inner child thing, I had to give myself experiences where okay, I'm going to take a few days away and go to Sedona just for myself, which at the time I was living in LA and I could drive to. It's kind of giving myself the entertainment and the soul care that I was looking for a partner to give me. And that helped me be a little more balanced in the early stages. And I said it again, but I just want to highlight it, feeling respected. So not love bombed, but feeling respected, they respect my time, they respect my energy, they honor their commitments, whether that's saying that they will text me the next day or whether that's, honoring a boundary that I have. I'm kind of getting a little too airy-fairy with this, but yeah, that's what I would focus on, is feeling emotionally safe and respected.
Yeah. And I love getting away and having your own time and not having them as your entertainment. I feel like so many of us get in that mindset, and not on purpose. It's completely unconscious.
Totally.
Yeah. And, it's a pattern I had to work on myself, because I was looking for entertainment, in other people, when, gosh, I just, it's so funny. Now I know myself and I am so entertaining. I had no idea. And I really,
Totally.
got the chance to learn myself better. And I think that's also key, is really spending time with yourself to learn and create new hobbies. And because, in my childhood, I think it sounds very, very similar. I didn't really have much of my own thoughts. My mother picked my clothes. She picked a lot of my music depending on the year. And it was like, I had no idea what I really liked. Like, what is my favorite color? I don't really know. And that's what I was going to say before. I kind of had a thought earlier that I was trying to get across and forgot, but it's interesting how, oh my gosh, I lost it again. There it goes. Well, that's okay.
No problem. That's really...
Yeah. But I do want to say, well, I guess I have just maybe one more question for you. What are the first things you tell your clients to look for and look out for when they first start dating again?
That's a great question. So the first one is similar to what I mentioned, which is, how does this person respond to your emotional vulnerability? And I don't suggest being super vulnerable right away and just laying it all out there, which is how I used to date. Oh my gosh, I want you to know all these things about me so that if you still love me, then I know that it's going to work. It's no, I like the Brene Brown thing of bounded vulnerability. So you share a little bit and then see how they respond. And for me, that was sharing a little bit more of what was under the surface, instead of just smiling and nodding and looking pretty and saying, oh, that's fine if you want to do this or that. It was actually having preferences, to your point, and we sometimes have to discover those. So if the person's let's go out on this night and I want to take you to the bar, or I want to have a drink, it'd be oh, you know what? I'll be coming off of teaching a yoga class and I'll need to eat first, actually sharing what I needed instead of shoving down my needs. So if you do that, if you share what you need, how do they respond? Are they no, it'll be fine. You can grab a bite at the bar. Do they really listen to what you're asking for, and do they adjust? Because what I'm looking for underneath that is, not only do they respect my boundaries and my needs, but that they actually want me to be happy and they want my nervous system to be regulated. And the other thing, which I mentioned, is about my emotions. If I'm sharing, oh, I'm feeling disappointed that you were running a little bit late. I know it's not a big deal, but it kind of made me a little anxious and I don't like feeling that way. Or I just want to know that both of our time is respected, and they're rude about it, then that's a huge red flag. So I want to know that they can hold space for my emotions, not just me holding space for their emotions and their volatility. I also want to know that if it's so hard to do, but if I pace the relationship a little more slowly, if they say, whatever, it's Friday night and you went on a date and they're oh, what are you doing tomorrow? This is so much fun. Maybe we should go rollerblading, or whatever it is, to say, oh, wow, part of me wants to say yes. And part of me knows that I actually just need some time to myself, to walk my dog or whatever. If someone says, oh, no, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. You can walk your dog later. If they're negotiating with me on the things that I'm saying, then that's a huge red flag. And I do have a tendency to just kind of jump into what the other person wants. So I have to be really careful of that. I had to be really careful of that. And then the other things I would look for, I think people talk about this all the time, but I just want to highlight it, is, do they have close friends in their life? Do they have people that they can be vulnerable with themselves? And do they have people that they feel like they're on a healing path with? So that could be a therapist, it could be a coach, could be a men's group. But I spent so long dating people who are oh, I'm really spiritual. And I would just assume that that meant spiritual the same way that I would, that they're going to therapy, that they're reading books, that they're learning. And then I'd come to find out like spiritual to them meant like smoking a lot of weed. Okay. So we have very different views. So yeah, those are just some things off the top of my head.
Yeah, but like all of those are very, very good points. And the main one that sticks out to me is boundaries are not negotiable. Like that is the number one. And you will find out so much about anyone if you just set a boundary and see how they react. I think that's one of the biggest tests. And I absolutely agree. That's a really good way to weed people out, dating or not dating, just people in your life in general. But yeah, I think that we've covered a lot in this episode, Violet.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate you. Oh yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Do you have a way for our listeners to come?
Yeah. People can connect with me in a few different ways. I have a program that's 6 weeks and it's just $69 and it's called Love Harmonics. And it's really about finding that harmony within yourself. So you're dating from a place that feels good and balanced and not expecting someone else to complete you or, fill a missing gap from when you were younger. And you can go to my website, which is violetlange.com/love harmonics to sign up for that. We start September 10th, but it will be offered other times too. So you can also get on the wait list if it's not open when you try that. I'm not great at Instagram, but I am on Instagram at Violet Love Lange. And then Facebook, I'm actually one of those older people who uses Facebook a lot more. So if you want to find me on Facebook, you can just search Violet Lange on Facebook.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I really, really appreciate you being here. I think we had a great conversation and a lot of information for our listeners. And yeah, that concludes our episode of Red Flags and Real Love. Thank you guys for tuning in, and until next time.
That's it for this episode of Red Flags and Real Love. If anything Virginia talked about today resonated with you, visit breakthepatterns.net and join the free class every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's free, it's live, and it's the best place to start. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a quick rating wherever you're listening. It takes 30 seconds, and it genuinely helps the show reach more people who need it. See you then.